The markets are off to a hot start this week as the resignation of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has sent much excitement into the crypto markets. Equities also finding a really great start to the week. We'll be discussing that and much more on today's episode of Money Never Sleeps. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, as usual, hit that like button on the video. If you're new here, subscribe to our channel. And remember, nothing that we say is financial advice, so please do your own research. Kevin, good morning. Happy Monday. We have some big news from our friends up north to start the week with beleaguered Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigning. This saw an immediate spike in Bitcoin up to 102K, broke back through that $100,000 barrier. A lot to be excited about there. We have equities continuing to charge. NVIDIA passed Apple for highest market cap by any company in the stock market today. So, the rally is back on as we head toward, a new presidency here in the U.S., a eventual new prime minister in Canada. I mean, wild time here in North America, buddy. But how are you doing as we start the week?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I just want to bring this up real quick. Leroy, we're doing great. Glad to see you here. Always glad to have you guys in the chat. But, I'm very excited for where we are right now. I've been pretty much doing TA and volatility for the past 6 months and watching when we're going to get the breaks. We caught the break for the yen carry trade back in August, and we're excited to see if there's going to be any more extremely volatile spikes. And there's a lot of things that are kind of happening that are kind of pointing towards the way that we should be seeing a lot more volatility pick up post January 8th, January 9th date in the markets. We're kind of seeing that the markets are somewhat uncertain. We had a really strong open to start the day, and now we can see that it's just up a little bit. The Dow also down right now. Mean reversals. We're seeing stuff like GameStop, breaking out of patterns that we kind of were waiting to see happen. And we're seeing Bitcoin potentially setting up for a really big drop and maybe even a MicroStrategy squeeze that could go up. There's a lot to talk about today. I'm very excited. I think that no one's going to sleep these next few weeks because there's just going to be so much going on, not just here, but in Asia. And we're going to see this contagion that goes from one nation to the next because guess what? Currency is about to get very exciting as well. So I'm doing great. I'm very happy to start the year this way. This is more action than we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, seeing, the NASDAQ and the S&P both up on the day, while the VIX is also increasing and longer duration bonds are going up in rate as well. A lot of different signals all at once. We have, like I said, crypto, nice little day here, 102 for Bitcoin, ETH just under 3,700. Solana got back over 220. It's kind of fighting to stay there. So we're seeing alts having a good day, outperforming Bitcoin by a little bit. Actually, no, I take that back. Bitcoin's leading the way. Bitcoin
no alts
back at 57.5%. So, and like tech is just going nuts. NVIDIA went over 150 at one point earlier today. It's settling in right below that number as we speak. Now the question becomes, what happens come inauguration day, post inauguration day? Do we see, some believe that the Trump rally is going to continue. Others are expecting the rug to be pulled. I know that you're more to the latter of that one. What do you think? And then, this week we have a lot of data coming out in the job market, and that is going to also impact the next Fed rate decision later this month. So a lot of different things to be looking at. Where do you think is the most important place to focus our attention this week?
It's always going to be liquidity in the system. So let's look at the reverse repo BTF piece into the DXY, because I think that's a really huge play that tells us kind of where a lot of liquidity is going to be sitting, and also some of the major moves that we could see in Forex over the next few days. So I'm just going to pull up the reverse repo. So they did inject $500 billion into the reverse repo. It was south of $100 billion at the time that they did it. So clearly that is a sign that the Fed was afraid that we were going to see some major stress amongst the banks. The banks were even upset that it was just that much. It wasn't enough in some ways that they were saying. And when we look at this reverse repo, we can see where they injected a shit ton of it, right? It was right here, the 20th, and then they announced that they were going to inject some. So start see this flowing up. And then we had one day on the Tuesday, the 31st of December, where it shot all the way up to about 473.46 billion, which is a $212 billion increase, and it was an 81% increase in the reverse repo. Now, fast forward to the next day, or the next trading day, I should say, it was down 49%, down 233 billion. So you saw that money eaten up instantly once it entered the system. That's not necessarily a bullish sign. You're seeing the price of some stocks kind of going up, but you're also seeing some of that money kind of just being eaten away, nothing really holding things where it should be. So that's a very interesting thing to see. And we also know that that period of the injection is over now. So what we're probably going to see is the reverse repo continue to drain. We haven't got the data for today, which is unfortunate. I was hoping that we'd get it by today, but I wouldn't expect this to be coming back down to 100 billion. And this kind of goes in line with what we're seeing with the Bank Term Funding Program, which is that we have about $4.41 billion left. It's draining about $1 billion a week. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a major drain this week, say $2 billion, $3 billion, and we're left by $1 billion by the time that Trump takes office. And the reason I just think that is because we're also seeing major moves within the currency markets, right? I'm pressing the wrong thing every single time. There we go. When we're looking for the DXY, we talked about this last week, it was going straight up nonstop, right? Nonstop. And then what happened? You had a little bit of a red day on Friday, and then today we had a pretty good pullback. The reason why this happened was some type of article regarding tariffs that Trump says wasn't necessarily true. Kind of bounced a little bit off at that level. I don't think that that's the reason why it was dumping. I think that we just are going to see the dollar come down a little bit until we get, maybe there's a bit of a crisis. Maybe the crisis is already here, and this was the front run to it. But why this is important is because the dollar is extremely overbought. I wouldn't be surprised if we do have a pretty good pullback. Even the Canadian dollar might be going up here now that Trudeau is gone. Wouldn't be surprised if that's the case if some of their stocks start pulling back. But that's the important thing is to watch Asia once again. I think the USD JPY is going to be coming back down. I think the yen carry trade is not far off, right? So a lot of these things that we're seeing is that we can't pump the markets up. The currencies are being either devalued or some getting stronger than they should be, that aren't ideal when the stock market is dropping necessarily or being volatile. Could start to see some of that unwind that we saw back in August, my bad, August. And it kind of coincides with what we're seeing here on the VIX. The VIX, once again, we keep charting it. We're looking at the breakout. The breakout is the 9th at the very latest, but the market's closed. So we'll say the 8th is going to be the breakout. And then anything beyond that date, you are open. It's open season on some type of volatility spike. Anything could be the reason. I don't know what it is necessarily, but it's just a perfect storm, perfect conditions for seeing something very similar to August or seeing something very similar to, I don't know. August is probably the best in recent history where we can say that was a major spike out of nowhere. And, it built up for a period of time, but we do know that this is very compressed. There's a lot less liquidity in the markets than there were back in August. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. Now, the interesting thing too is how the Dow is pulling back significantly, right? It's down roughly how many percentage points from the height? It's down about 5.37%. There is the case that the Dow is the one that rolls over faster than the S&P and the NASDAQ, and that's because the Dow doesn't necessarily have those top 7 stocks in it to hold it up. We're seeing those kind of just holding up the market once again today. NVIDIA is doing its best. I don't know how long that's going to last, right? But what I can say is that we could see the volatility come back if the Dow starts dipping really bad next week. Something we're going to keep an eye on because I do think we are running out of time, and we are going to start seeing a bit of a pullback at some point. Now they could push this to all-time highs real quick, not the Dow, but the S&P and the NASDAQ. It's not too far off from where we currently are, and that could definitely change things. But for the most part, I think that the Dow is going to be the one that leads the charge on any type of move to the downside. And if that's the case, then I don't think volatility or the S&P and NASDAQ slowly following after would be too far-fetched to believe.
All right, let's move on from there. Do you want to talk about the situation in Asia? Do you want to go into crypto? Which one is tickling your fancy at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we could do Asia, then we'll just talk about GameStop real quick because I'm charged on that. But let's see Asia real quick. You can see that the Nikkei had another bad day last night, 587 points down, about 1.47%. Day prior was down almost 1%, about 386 points. Now you're starting to see it kind of get extended here without too much necessarily happening. I think this one waits for some type of move in the US. And again, I mean that in the currency markets. I wouldn't be surprised if this one goes fairly quickly, very similar to what we saw back here in July into August with that carry trade unwind. But you're very top heavy, in my opinion. You're getting close to the extremely overbought, and you don't necessarily have a lot of support within this range. You're probably going to be coming down a little bit lower. So if I were to say worst case scenario, something that did happen to the Nikkei, and say worst case scenario but conservative level, you're looking at somewhere around 35, which is about a 10% drop in the Nikkei at some point, maybe in Q1. So we're going to keep an eye out on that. I just think that we are definitely going to see some major moves, especially with the FOMC coming at the end of this month. That could definitely impact some of Japan's policy, especially if the stock market doesn't react to it as nicely as it would. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be losing a lot of money on the yen that they borrowed to put into the US market. So that's something we're going to keep an eye on. Derivatives obviously are going to be the ones that would be impacted extremely hard. And speaking of derivatives, let's talk about what's going on with GameStop. Now, we're only 3 days out from when Roaring Kitty said that the squeeze begins. He didn't say the squeeze begins then, but 109 on the time cover. I think he's trying to say that it's time to cover your shorts if you're shorting this market. And I think people are actually taking his advice, because if we look at what's happened today, let me just pull up. What am I looking for? Bookmarks. Yes. What we're looking at today, someone actually is, where is it? The Chicago Stock Market Exchange. And I think it was $40 million worth of GME buys today. So that's a big move. That's institutional money. That's not retail money whatsoever. And again, that's what I said. We'll probably see institutional money that moves this. But I wanted to show you guys on the smaller time frame is that we're within channels within channels. I had to pull this up on the hourly because it's a little bit harder to see. But this is what's going on here. You're in a parallel channel that broke out, that went into an even tighter parallel channel right on top of it. And then you broke out. And now you're also within this massive parallel channel right here. Now, the question is, does this come back down and test $29 before it starts to push up again? I don't necessarily know. What I do know is that there are a lot of institutional buyers buying this. We're seeing the call premiums increase astronomically. I was trading earlier this morning. I bought some of these calls very cheap because I saw the pullback. I got them. Within a matter of 10 minutes afterwards, we started seeing GameStop shoot north of $33. And why that's important is because north of 33.50 or so, right above this line here, we're probably heading to 35. Now, if the squeeze does happen and people need to cover, and a lot of people are holding the stock, and then we're seeing a lot of these calls also come in, then that's going to push the price up. And those calls are going to be extremely valuable as people try to buy back the stock in order to close their positions. So I do think that there's a massive potential for a major squeeze coming here. Do I think it's going to happen by OPEX January 17th? I think that we are going to see some type of breakout in the coming days. I just don't necessarily know to what levels. Will it be May of this year where it shot up to like $64, or will it be something similar to 2021 when it shot up to $120? And again, this is obviously adjusting for the stock splits, but I think that we are in a major place for a big squeeze, very similar to what's happening with MicroStrategy as well. A lot of idiots were short. I mean, myself included, I closed my short on MicroStrategy, but I shorted up here like 540 or something like that. Came down. A lot of idiots are now short this thing, right? The problem is when you try and short something too late, everyone knows the position. You could easily throw some money into this and push the price up. So I think that's why we're seeing this breakout a little bit here on MicroStrategy pushing up. Obviously, Bitcoin's price going up. Who cares? I think that thing we'll talk about in a second is a very different scenario what could happen in MicroStrategy, but they're going to try and cover this, and they're going to try and liquidate people out of this because you shorted too late. And guess what? Now you're going to pay for it, and you're going to not be in the money by the time OPEX comes, and you're going to have to close those positions. And every time they close those positions, it pushes the stock price up. I bet Michael Saylor is just very happy about this right now. But we do know that the liquidity for them to keep buying Bitcoin is running out. I think it should be done by this month. I just don't think that they're going to be able to push it up much higher, especially at these levels, especially if we're not seeing any more tether prints. But point is, I think there could be a little bit of a squeeze here on MicroStrategy. We're already seeing a pretty good one since what, $287. It's almost up $100 since. Watch out for that. I wouldn't play that game, in my opinion. I'm completely out of my MicroStrategy position. Outside of that, I think covers it for TradFi. Let's go to Bitcoin. What do you feel about Bitcoin right now, Jweb?
That's part of me feels ready in the new tax year to take a little bit of profit, but another part of me does think that we are going to get closer to 125. Just my thoughts there. I don't know though. This is why I don't trade, and I mainly just try to accumulate and hold, and then take profits when needed. But I think we are, breaking through. I want to see where we close today. Like we're in the last hour of the trading day. It's catching a little bit of a bid here, back up over 102. It feels like if we can close the day above 102, if we can, stay where we are through tomorrow as well, we could be set up for a nice push into the weekend as also. So, I mean, I'm not selling at the moment. I'm still just holding, but I'm also not buying at this price.
I completely agree. Right. I think at least the buying aspect, I think that's the part that we really need to be careful about. Fact of the day, MicroStrategy acquired 1,000 Bitcoin for about $100 million, raising its total to just short of 500,000 Bitcoin total. Again, that's why we're seeing the prices go up. They bought some. I don't necessarily know if the volume coming in is retail or a bunch of other buyers, but the problem is when you have such a concentrated amount of a market in the hands of one institution or a few institutions, is if they fuck up one thing, I mean, that could fuck up the entire party up for everyone else. That's just the concern I have. I don't trust Michael Saylor. That's just personal choice that based off of what has happened in the past. And also I just don't believe in the Bitcoin maxi future, that even one Bitcoin is equal to one Bitcoin. Yeah, but one Bitcoin at 100,000 is very different than one Bitcoin at 4,000, right? So that's kind of the mindset that I have. I'm not saying it's going to go down to 4,000, but I look back at what's happened in the past few weeks, and we can see that we did break through this trend line at 101 on December 15th. And we had 2 days where we pushed up to 108. And then by the time we got to Wednesday of that following week, we could see that we broke right back below it. So what we want to see is to see if this holds. We're going to get a back test to this level. Regardless, I believe we are going to get a back test to that, especially with the stochastic RSI being so extremely overbought on the daily. Question is, does it hold? Right? If it doesn't hold, that tells me that we're probably going to be getting closer to the point where we could see a major pullback in towards the end of the month of January. Kind of lines up with the VIX and all the other stuff. Again, pre-halving or post-halving years, January, never good. To see where it goes, we're looking at somewhere close to probably like south of 80K. I would say like 76K remains my target if we do get that type of January flash crash that we have in the past. But again, if we are unable to close below this trend line and we bounce off of it and we keep pushing, your thesis, I think, doesn't seem impossible for Bitcoin to keep pushing up. So that's the thing that we want to keep an eye on, right? Leroy, yes, I agree. I like Bitcoin. I think it's great. I just don't like Bitcoin up here. I think that's just my whole thesis in terms of entry.
I'm kind of looking at the chart right now. I mean, we're on 7 straight days of green for Bitcoin, similar to where we were back in early November after the election. We saw a little bit of chop there, and then it continued to move up. So I would think we could definitely see something similar for the next few days. That move up into the weekend, like I said, sentiment is pretty high right now. The vibes are high. And I also know quite a few people who believe that like Inauguration Day is a sell the news kind of event. I think for me personally, it's still, I'm not trying to time this market. I'm gonna keep holding because I don't need the cash right now, and I do believe in it long term, and I just also am self-aware enough to know that I'm not a good trader. So I can ride out volatility, no problem. I've done it many times before. So I will just look. I have cash on hand that if I never get a great entry again, that's okay. I'm happy with my position. If I do get a chance to buy Bitcoin again down in the 80s, I'll probably add, and it'll increase my cost basis a bit, but that's fine. I did most of my buying when Bitcoin was, 20K. So I'm okay if I have to buy, if I can accumulate a little bit more and it increases my basis, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks. The election is just same. The election and the inauguration are just such important, I guess, psychological events in the markets that we are going to be possibly overthinking it, and it'll be more simple when we look back. But Gav, I expect you to be on top of it when Sailor's whole convertible bond shenanigans start getting sus. Are they not sus already? And again, it's crypto is such a. I mean, I don't know. Let's put it this way. The only two people that I haven't seen fall so far, Jensen Huang, Michael Saylor. Maybe they don't. Maybe I've been wrong this whole time that some of the practices that those companies have used are maybe sound, and maybe I'm wrong about vendor financing or, the whole Saylor way of getting Bitcoin up higher and higher. But I think that it's going to be very fun to see what happens if I was right and there is a lot more pain in the markets. And again, it also offers us wonderful opportunities to get into Bitcoin. But what I had on the screen is just some of the alts. And level of resistance is still being very tricky and you're extremely overbought. And then you see volume depleting on XRP. This is just one. Solana, a little bit higher than the trend line. But again, that could be a multitude of things. That could be a fake out. Let's see how it closes over the next few days. If you start seeing it ride below this line and you're still extremely overbought, at some point, either a lot of money is going to have to come in or you're going to see a lot of money just flow out of these things. I'm not too convinced on the crypto market thus far in 2025. I think that there's a lot of pain coming to the market in general, and you're seeing the bond market kind of screaming at the top of its lungs, and where you could see a lot of money kind of flow into if markets in general pull back, right? People are going to want something safe, especially older money. If you ask me, institutional money, they're going to be buying those bonds at probably like 4.62. If say, I don't know, Nvidia swan dives one morning, we just didn't expect it. So I'm going to stay on the side that I'm cautiously bearish going into the next week or so. But yeah, I'm not going to marry one position one way or the other, I think.
All right. Anything else that you want to discuss today before we wrap this bad boy up?
No, man. I'm just, like I said, I'm very excited in this market. Keep watching the numbers that are coming out regarding liquidity. Again, if those things start getting closer to zero, then we are literally in the 2020 scenario of the crash. I won't say what the crash was caused by because it might be a different crash this time around. But you're also seeing a lot of people, like I believe, what's the one guy from Barr from the Fed? He stepped down also. And then we're also seeing Trudeau down. We're seeing snap elections in Germany in the next few weeks. There's a lot of things that are moving in the world that are causing uncertainty that personally, if I knew what was coming in the market, maybe I wouldn't want to be in charge or have to deal with any of the headaches that are coming. But as of right now, I'm going to stay bullish on the VIX and more so bullish on GME.
Okay. Question from Leroy here about that regret of selling too early. I think for some of it, man, if it's messing with you mentally, you got to treat it like an old girlfriend on Instagram, and you just got to unfollow that shit and not pay. Take it off of your watch list. Take it off of your trading view. Try to just ignore it as much as possible if you're worried about trying to play catch.
Let me show them a chart that I messed up on recently, and this is kind of the thing I had to tell myself, right? So, buddy, you guys know.
Let me tell you about me messing up the fart coin trade and how I was alerted to its existence when the market cap was 4 million and it's now 1 point something billion. And every day I just have to live with the fact that I have a buddy who made 6 figures on fart coin while I just sat on my hands like an idiot. Okay. Like it makes me want to throw up.
I mean, I know how you feel, except that mine wasn't Farcoin. Mine was an electric vehicle manufacturer that may or may not have ever created any electric vehicles ever. And I had the bottom of this move. I was buying down here at like 106, 107 for FFIE. And I was like, this is a short-term play, right? I had calls, I had positions. I had like 2,000 shares or something like that of this company. Next thing I know, one morning it shoots to 443, and pre-market it was even higher. It went like to $5, and I'm like, oh, okay, so we might be in the scenario back in May of 2024 where it pushes up an insane amount. I mean, it shot up all the way to $155 per share, right? It was such a low market cap. Where did I get out? I was an idiot and I waited for confirmation and I got out at like 230. So I only made like double my money. So I could have got back in, but I would have lost so much more money because the buying volume just dropped out of nowhere. I think if you make profit, there is nothing to be upset about. And like Jweb said, just treat it like, hey, I got what I needed out of it. Could have got more, but there's always money to be made in some other aspect. That's how I treated it and moved into GameStop. I think GameStop is kind of where I've allowed myself to heal from that bad ex-girlfriend, and I'm excited for what's to come in the future. So there's nothing wrong with taking profit. It just, there'll be other stocks that you can definitely make some more money on, and you're going to catch a lot of bigger winners. Just can't dwell on the losers sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Have a plan, stick to the plan, no regrets. There's going to be important. You can't, let that time dwelling on it distract you from other potential moves that can be made. So use that liquidity somewhere else if you think that, maybe you're that $15 a share is the top of that move. Leroy,
also
appreciate you.
Yeah. Just because it's a bank that he's also in, I've never been bullish on banks. And it's just, I will say that that's the whole reason why I've been covering the BTFP for fucking over a year now. Banks are always at the center of all financial crises. I don't know if this one's going to be, but I know that there are probably a lot more that are in some trouble. We talked about the reverse repo. I don't want to be holding banks when the markets crash. That's just one thing I will say. That's not financial advice, but that's just something I've learned. I don't want to be holding at all. I'll buy when the markets are bleeding, but not today.
All right. That's going to do it for today. Leroy, appreciate you joining us and watching the show. Anyone else out there who enjoyed today's episode, appreciate you too. Hit that like button if you have not yet. Subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment. We'll be back on Wednesday, discuss the latest jobs data, anything else going on in the market. So until then, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.